Alright, these are your lesson notes for section 19.5. This is our last lesson for chapter 19, and this is on what we call the cumulative frequency graphs and tables. So starting in on the cumulative frequency table, what we're looking at for this is creating an extra column of data that finds the sum as you go. So if you take a look right here, this is a table that we've seen similar to this in the past, where we have a class and then a frequency chart to go with it. So from right here, if this is the class that did from 0 to 19 hours of homework, so there were 12 people within that class of data. There were 32 people who did somewhere between 20 and 39 hours of homework, 18 people within this class, so on and so on. And so here's the new column that we're adding in. This is your cumulative frequency column, and just like the word cumulative suggests, we are adding as we go. So if you look right here, from 0 to 19, we have a total of 12 people. But as we move forward into the next class, the cumulative column adds everything from 0 all the way up to that point. And so we are adding 12 plus 32 to get this information. So this 44 represents the total from 0 to 39. And then as you go up into the next row, so now we're up into the third class, and so again we take the 44 that we already had, we add this 18 onto it, and now we have a total of 62. So again, if we're interpreting the numbers that you see here, these 62 people represent everyone who did homework from 0 all the way up to 59 hours of homework. That's these 62 people. So now when we jump into the next class, we got another 10 people that we're going to add on. And so now we're up to a total of 72. So again, these 72 people represent everyone who claimed they did homework between 0 and 79 hours. And then finally we have the last group of 20 that we add in. So there is a total of 92 from everywhere from 0 to 99 hours of homework. And so this is our cumulative frequency column. And again, we just added as we went. So this is the cumulative frequency table, and what we're going to do with that is we're going to use it to make a cumulative frequency graph. Kind of the special name for this is the ogive graph, but we'll pretty much refer to this as the cumulative frequency graph for the most part. So first things first, you're going to be given graph paper for this. Pretty tight grid that we have going on, but you're going to be given lines that are darkened, like every fifth line will be darkened for you, so we'll be able to label these pretty easily. So here's what we're looking at. The x-axis that we're going to be coming up with is going to come from these numbers right here. So these are what we call the upper class limits for each class. So 19, 39, 59, 79, and 99 are going to be the x values, and the cumulative frequencies are the y values. So these are your x's, these are your y's that go with them. So the first data point that we have would be the point 19, 12. The next point that we will plot will be 39, 44, so on and so on. And so I listed those data points right here. Those are the 5 points that we would need to plot onto that graph that you see over here on the right. Just a quick side note, everything that we've done so far in this chapter, when we had a class of data like this, we always did the mid-interval as our x value. This is the one time for cumulative frequencies that you don't use the mid-interval, you use the upper class limit instead. And so you got to remember that for cumulative frequencies. A lot of times, and especially on this chapter test, people will get these wrong because they're going to use the mid-interval instead of the upper class limit. So just be careful on this one. This is the only time you use the upper class limit. So those are the points that we have listed. When you go to create the graph, these will always be pretty much like a 50 by 50 grid. So count by numbers that would make sense with the problem. So if you look at the x's, they go all the way up to 99. So if I have 50 lines right here, it would make sense to count by 2's. To spread out my data and cover everything from, if this is from 0 to 100, then this will nicely fit on my x-axis. On my y-axis, I need to go as high as 92, so I'll just count by 2's on the y-axis as well. That'll nicely fit this 92 data points if I get all the way up to 100, since I'm counting by 2's on my 50 by 50 grid. So you can change what you're counting by, but you need to label what you are counting by. So in this case, if I was counting by 2's, I made sure that those numbers were nice and clear on my graph. These must be labeled. That's really important. That's an important grading point when you're making a cumulative frequency graph. You got to label the values that you're using. So as we plotted those points, the next grading point for me is to make sure that you start at 0, 0. So this is always the point that you start at, is 0, 0. And then from here, you are to draw as best as you can, a smooth curve that fits through the data points that we plotted. And so you are to, as best as you can, draw a smooth curve through those points. And that is our cumulative frequency graph. So again, there are 3 grading points for me when I grade your cumulative frequency graph. One is that you plotted the correct 5 data points here. That's one grading point. The other grading point is that you started from 0, 0. And the third grading point is that you created a smooth curve through all those points. Right? It's not supposed to be a rigid line by line curve. It's supposed to be a smooth curve through those points. And so those are the 3 grading points for the cumulative frequency graph. Here's how we work with it. So these are the type of questions, the things that you'll need to be able to do from a graph. And so the first thing that they're asking us to find is the median of the graph. So again, keep in mind, the median is always the middle point of the graph. Let me go back up here for just a minute. So if these are our frequencies, if there were 92 total data points, right, the median would be the 46th point within that data. So here's mathematically how we're going to be working with that. So again, this is going to be based on the y values here. So we're starting on the y-axis, and we're going to be tracing these over and down to get our answers from the x-axis. So right here we're saying, okay, the median is the middle, so the 50% mark is the median. So if we do 50% of 92, that means we are looking at the 46th term. So what is the 46th term? Well, if we go up our y-axis and we find the 46th term, if we trace that over to our graph, and then wherever you hit that graph, just go straight down, and that should identify for you the homework hours that are the median amount of hours. And so 42 would be our answer for the median. The lower quartile, well, just like the median is the 50% mark, the lower quartile would be the 25th% mark. Right? This is the first quartile, or the lower quartile. So if we said, okay, well, what is 25% of 92? We get 23. And so we're referring to the 23rd term. So the question really ultimately is, what is the value of the 23rd term? So if we go up our y-axis and find the 23rd term, we can trace that over and down as accurately as possible. We're going to identify this as our 23rd term. So 27 is our lower quartile, or Q1. Same thing with the upper quartile. Upper quartile represents the 75th% mark within the data. So again, we're going to take 75% of 92, and we're going to see that as the 69th term. So we need to figure out what is the value of the 69th term. So again, if you go up your chart and find the 69th term, trace that over and down, see where it hits your graph. And straight on down, we got about 72 for this one, so 72 hours is our third quartile. For this, remember, we have run into the inner quartile range question before, and that's always Q3 minus Q1. And so if we just subtract those results, we get the inner quartile range. And now you saw how we use these percents right here. We can use any percent for this. So even if they said, what is the 40th percentile? we'll just take the same approach that we took here, and we would say, okay, well, what is 40% of 92? And it's about 37, so the 37th term is going to give us the 40th percentile mark. So if we go up to about the 37th term, trace that over and down, so this is the value of 36, this is our answer, 36 hours is about the 40th percentile mark for that 36 hours. So anytime they're asking you for those percentile type questions, we're starting over here and we're tracing those over and down. Now there are some questions where they can start you down with hours, and you might have to trace those up and left and answer with a frequency value. So I wrote a couple of those questions down here just so you could see what that would look like. So what if we were asked the question, if you did less than 40 hours of homework? So notice right off the bat, they're giving me hours of homework. They're giving me an x-axis value, which means I am starting on the x-axis at 40. And they're asking me for a frequency question, so I need to end up on the frequency line to answer the question. So we're going to start with 40 hours of homework. It says if you did less than that, you failed the class. So how many people failed the class? Well, so if we find those 40 hours, so right about here we had the 40 hours of homework. So if we were to trace that up and over, and I'm having a little hard time seeing this on my graph, hopefully you can see a little better on yours, but whatever that number is would be the answer to that question. So this would be about how many people failed the class, would be that answer right there. Same thing right here. If it says if you did at least 80 hours of homework, you got an A in the class. So how many people got an A? Well, I need to do at least 80 hours of homework. So let's take a look at that. So right here I have my 80 hours of homework. So if I trace this up and over, and let me take that straight over as best as I can, and it looks like that would be about 74. So here's kind of the tricky question. Here's where you got to think a little bit. This question said I needed to do at least 80 hours of homework. So from 74 all the way up to 92, remember that's the highest mark on this graph is 92. Everyone who did from 74 to 92 got an A in the class. So how many people is that? So if we did 92 minus 74, that would tell us how many people are in this area that got an A in the class. And so you got to be careful with the wording on that to make sure that we answer these questions correctly. This question in particular was referring to numbers lower than 40, which is why when we trace this one up and over, right, that was our answer because that covered everything from here down. But for this question, it said at least 80, so we're talking about those who did 80 or more, which is why when we went up and over and we got this number of 74, we're not using 74 as our answer. We're talking about those who did 74 or more. And so we're going from 74 to 92. Everyone in that range were those who got an A in the class. And so that's why we did the 92 minus 74 to get that answer. So again, it's just careful interpretation of the question that is being asked of you.